Hello, welcome to part 5 of our animation course. So far we've already set up our skeleton for our spaceship, and we have this handy handle over here that we can grab onto to select it. Right now all my skeleton joints are hidden. If I go to show joints, they are displayed like so. And we have X-ray joints turned on so we can see our skeleton through our mesh. So now let's create a remote control source to control the moving parts on our spaceship more easily. We're going to go to create a locator. So here's the locator right here. And what a locator essentially is an empty object that you can just do whatever you want with. It has no real purpose all on its own. You can use it to add controls or link things to it to make things move. So for example, if I were to select the ship's handle, hold shift and select my locator and press the P key, so now when I select this locator I also select the ship, and the locator becomes the new pivot point, so it would like spin around this locator. But that doesn't really make sense. That's just an example. What we're going to use this locator for is just to control systems for all our moving parts. So whenever I animate the spaceship, I want the locator to travel with it. So I'm going to select the locator. Select this handle. I'm going to hold down shift and press P to unparent it. So now when I select the locator, it will not select the ship. That was just an example. So I have the locator selected. I'm going to hold down shift and select the spaceship handle and press P. So now I parented the locator to the spaceship. So now when I have the spaceship selected and I'm moving it around, that locator will travel with it. Now, a locator is not something that renders, so whenever you take a rendered shot of the scene, the locator, as well as this handle, will not be visible. So this is just a control mechanism that we'll use while we're animating. So you look on the channel box over here, you see locator 1, we could rename this to be, I don't know, spaceship controls. And it has, translate XYZ, rotate XYZ, so on, all the channels you would expect from an object in Maya. We actually don't need all those channels for this particular object since it will always be traveling with the spaceship. So we can go to Window, General Editors, Channel Control, and make sure our locator is selected. So the channel control has lots of stuff in here. On the left side in this box, you'll see what it shows is keyable channels in the channel box, which it displays here. We're actually going to select all of these by clicking this one, hold shift and click the last one. Click the move button to move it to non-keyable hidden in the middle, which actually removes it from the channel box so we'll no longer see them, which is what we want. So now that we've closed that, we select our locator here. You can see there's no longer these channels up here that we had before. So what are we going to do with this thing? We're going to make our own channels, our own custom attributes for the locator that we'll use as our controls for the spaceship's moving parts. So we'll select the locator and go to Modify, Add Attribute. So this gives us our Add Attribute window where we can add our own custom attributes. So we're going to make sure we're in the New tab. We're making a new attribute. And for the first one, let's start small and let's work on the controls for the cockpit. So for the long name, it's just naming it. We can call it Cockpit Open. We can use underscores to separate the words. Cockpit Open. Make attribute is keyable, that's fine. And then we can use a floating data type. Scalar is fine. And then we have a minimum and maximum. So let's say we want a slider. Let's say you have a slider that goes from like 0 to 10 or something like that, where 0, the cockpit window is closed, and 10, the cockpit's open. So we'll say minimum is 0, maximum is 10, and the default value where it starts, we'll say is the closed position, so we'll say 0. And then we'll hit add. So now over here on the right we see cockpit open with the value of 0. If we click the channel and minimize, click and drag, you can see I can slide it left and right. It goes from 0 to 10. Like so. So if you type in 12 and hit enter, you'll see it goes back to 10. It can't go any higher than 10. That's what we set. And we'll go back to 0 and hit enter. So obviously nothing happened yet. We have to actually link this control with the movement of our joint that controls the cockpit cover. Let's go ahead and add another attribute. Let's select the locator. So another attribute, another movement control we could have would be the flaps. So let's say our right wing flap and our left wing flap. And we can do a similar thing where maybe instead this time we'll say a value of positive 10 makes the flap go up, a value of 0 has them at their position as they are now, and negative 10 makes them flap down. So let's change this to, let's say, left flap. Oh yeah, underscores. Left flap. And our minimum now will be negative 10, maximum positive 10, and default is 0. And hit add. So now we have our left flap. We'll do the same for right flap. Minimum of negative 10, maximum of 10, default 0. Hit add. So now we have cockpit open, left flap, and right flap. Now also, let's not forget our wings can fold. So the point of that is I'd like them to kind of fold upwards whenever it comes in for a landing. We don't need it to fold down pretty much. So let's say this position here is as low as it will go, and then it will fold up to kind of make it park when it comes to the landing pad. So we'll create a new one called left wing. This will be the wing bending. So again, minimum we'll say this time is 0, maximum is 10, default is 0. Add, then we'll do right wing. Minimum 0, maximum 10, default 0. Click add. You can see them being added over here in the channel box. We have cockpit open, left flap, left wing, right wing. So some other controls we might want would be the guns shooting. So this would be a little bit different. Let's see, let's think about this for a second. What we could do is have a slider effect where at 0 it's kind of at the starting position where it's not shooting, and then if we slide it all the way up to 10, it actually goes through the motions of firing and then going back to a rest state. So for example, with a value of 10 being the maximum, the value of 5 will be the gun actually shooting, and then it'll kind of come back to its retract position. So from 0 to 10, where 0 is at rest, and 10 is also will be at rest, but the 5 will be all the pieces moving as it fires. So when you slide it left and right, up and down, it'll look like it's just shooting constantly. Does that make sense? So we're going to have 3 guns, left gun, right gun, and I guess we'll call this the top gun. Let's go ahead and add those. Right gun, and we'll go ahead and say 0, 10, 0, and add. Left gun, 0, 10, 0, add. And then top gun, hey, that's a movie. Top gun, 0, 10, 0, and add. So aside from that, I think that's pretty much all of the little controls for our moving parts that we'll need for this particular ship. Don't forget, we also have the landing pad model that's included in our project scenes. That model will also have its own skeleton and controls that we'll get to soon. So now I think we're done with adding attributes, so we can close this. So we've added all these attributes to our locator, but they still don't really do anything yet. Now we're going to use what's called set-driven key to control these. Set-driven key can be found in the animation menu sets, under animate, set-driven key, and then we have set. So let's deselect everything, go to animate, set-driven key, set. So this is our set-driven key window. Let's move it right here. So our spaceship remote control here, our spaceship controls, are going to be the driver. So you see I have a section called driver, and this button down here says load driver. So I'll click that button, and now our spaceship controls with all of these custom attributes that we've made has been loaded into the driver section. So what do we want to be driven? All the moving parts of the spaceship will be what are driven by the spaceship controls. So let's start with the cockpit hinge joint. So I select the joint itself. We'll press the load driven button to load the cockpit hinge joint into the driven section down here. So it's the rotate Z channel that we want to control with our remote control settings. And remember, with a cockpit open attribute set at 0, we want it to be closed. So right now let's click on here our spaceship controls. We see our cockpit open channel is set to 0. Our cockpit hinge rotate Z is in a closed position. So right now we're set when it comes to those two attributes being linked. So let's make sure we select our cockpit open channel in our driver channels, and then our rotate Z channel in our driven channels. And right now we'll click key. So we've set a keyframe, so whenever the cockpit open channel is at 0, the rotate Z of the cockpit hinge will also be at 0. So now let's move our cockpit open channel all the way up to 10. So that's the maximum value for the cockpit open channel that we've created. And so we want our cockpit now to be in the fully open position at that value. So let's now rotate our cockpit hinge as far up as we want. Let's say 70, like so. And now we'll click key. So now our cockpit open control and our spaceship controls that are in this locator, if we select it, choose the cockpit open, and middle mouse click and drag, you can see how now it controls the cockpit opening and closing. When we get to that portion of the animation and we want the cockpit to open up, we can just simply select our locator, grab the cockpit open controls here, and middle mouse click and drag, and it'll open up as far as we want it to go because we set it to its maximum with our values. It will not rotate any further than this. And when we take cockpit open down to 0, it won't rotate any further than that down. It'll just go back to its resting position where we want it to be. So set driven key is really powerful, and that allows you to do these kinds of controls. So what do we want to drive next? How about the left flap? So we need to select the left flap joint. I believe that one is over here. Choose this left wing flap and click load driven. So now the left wing flap joint is in our driven section of our set driven key box, and our left flap control is at 0, which is where we want it to be when it's at this resting position. So right now we can choose our left flap and see which rotation axis we're using. Still rotate Z to get this to rotate up and down. So we'll choose rotate Z and left flap, and at their current positions we'll say key. So let's go back to our spaceship controls now and change our left flap value to -10, which you'll remember that's when we want the flap to rotate down. So now we'll select the flap and rotate it down as far as we want it to go at its lowest point. So we'll just kind of eye it here. That looks about right. And now with these two attributes still selected, left flap and rotate Z, we'll say key. Again, we'll go back to our spaceship controls, and now we'll change this to +10. Now you'll notice that the flap already went back to its resting position because when it got to 0, it knows from -10 to 0, these are the two positions that we've already set. But past that, it doesn't know. So we're going to go up to +10, select the joint, and rotate it to its highest point when it rotates, about right here or so, and say key. So now, when we choose our spaceship controls, we have our left flap. We can rotate it up and down with our left flap control panel here, like so. We can take it back to 0, and we're all set. We'll just repeat that process with the other side. Select the joint, right wing flap, load driven. We're still looking at the rotate Z axis. And make sure we choose right flap this time in our spaceship control section up here. So right flap, rotate Z, and the right flap is currently set to 0, and the rotate Z of the flap is at its middle position. So we'll hit key. Again, we'll choose our spaceship controls, increase our right flap up to +10, and remember that means the flap will be going up. So we'll select the flap and rotate it to its high position that we want, and click key. Back to the spaceship controls. Remember, you can just click it right here, and we'll go to -10. So here you see we have a bit of a bug where it should be when right flap is at 0. This should have gone back to where its starting point was, and because it didn't, we need to go ahead and set that now. So make sure we have right flap selected. So let's change right flap to 0. Select the right flap. Make sure right flap is selected here, and take this back to 0. This resting state, and hit key. There we go. So I had a little hiccup there. We'll make sure we have the correct channels selected in our channel box sections of our set driven key window here. So now we'll choose our spaceship controls, take the right flap to -10, choose the right wing flap joint, rotate it down as far as we want it to go, like so. Hit key, choose spaceship controls, make sure this is all working the way we want it to. There we go. So +10 takes it up to there, -10 takes it down to there, and a 0 takes it back to the middle position. Okay, so now we've got our flaps controlled, we have our cockpit door controlled. Let's look at our wing controls now. So it's load driven with our wing joint selected. This is the right wing, so make sure we choose the right wing in our spaceship controls here. And we'll be looking at the Z-axis, and because of the problems we were having with getting the local rotation axis to really be the way we want it to, we can actually choose all 3 rotate channels to key just to ensure that we have the right motion we want. So with right wing right here set to 0 and our right wing joint at its current position, make sure we select our rotate channels and choose the key button. Okay, back to our spaceship controls. Choose our right wing channel and have it go up to +10. Go back to right wing and rotate it up to the position that we like. And if you need to make some adjustments because of the kind of funkiness we had earlier, you can do that here. It's about like that. And now we'll hit the key. So now if we change our right wing from 10 to 0, it should fold up and down. Like so. So we do the same with the other side. Choose our left wing, click load driven. We'll just choose all the rotates. Make sure we have left wing right here and hit key as they are current positions. Let's go back to our spaceship controls, make the left wing go up to 10. Go back to the wing and rotate it to its up position. If you want to make it symmetrical with the other wing, we can go back to the right wing and put it up, and then look at the rotation values that we put in. So we'll say this one is 5.46 or so, call it the same here, and negative let's say 0.9, and then this is 67.3 approximately, so that's pretty close. Now we can hit key again. Let's go back to our spaceship controls. Left wing up and down, that works. Right wing also works. Okay. So we have our wing controls, the flaps and the wings bending. We have our cockpit door opening and closing. Next we'll work on the guns and have those fire as we move these gun sliders left and right. So I'll see you next time.